This video is an extract from an interview where an art professional shares their top tips for artists. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy this video. Welcome for today's webinar with Nicky Ginsburg, who has been in the art world for over 30 years, from the UK to Australia and France. She's been collecting and dealing in international contemporary art since 1991. In 2006, she established NG Art Gallery in Sydney, Australia, and since then, she's nurtured the careers of many contemporary artists, showing their work nationally and globally. And today, among all of the things that I've described, if that wasn't enough, Nikki also runs NG Art Creative, which is a non-profit artist residency and gallery located in Provence in the south of France. So, Nikki, we can't wait to pick your brains, and thanks again for being here.
Pleasure. Thank you.
We use the term collecting and dealing for lack of better terms, really. Today, we might say that you were working as an art advisor, or you were doing pop-up shows, or you were a gallerist, or even an agent for the artist. So can you tell us what that looked like for you at the time, and maybe what that still looks like for you today?
Well, in fact, I established NG Art as a brand a long time ago in 1991, where I called myself NG Art Dealership. And I would curate exhibitions into pop-up spaces. For want of a better word, we didn't even call them pop-up spaces. And then when I became more established, I then started to have solo artists and represent them in inverted commas, because without a gallery in those days, it was very hard to represent an artist, because what they wanted was somewhere they could call home. And then what I probably would be important to say at this point is that I studied art history at Sydney University, not until later on in life. So when I was 40 years old, by that point, I was still doing the NG Art Dealership thing, very successful, sending artists to different parts of Australia to exhibit their work. I actually brought an exhibition to London in Chelsea to support the artists and give them a platform outside of Australia, which was always my intention. I'm a very international thinker. I grew up in London. I felt Australia was a little small, and it was an opportunity for me to sort of make the most of who I was as a person. And then out of that came the NG Art Gallery, where I bought a building, which was an old, beautiful church. And I established the restaurant downstairs, the gallery upstairs. The restaurant was run by my business partner, Pierre, who had an absolute love and passion for the arts in the same way that I did. And we invited people to partake in amazing evenings of, we call them Feast for the Senses dinners. And we'd invite guest speakers to come and participate, and I would be the mediator. So a number of artists or people in the art world, or curators or art historians, even writers, musicians, because I think what was so interesting was to have that conversation around the arts, which can be diverse. It's not linear. So that was very successful, and that brought a lot of people to the gallery, and in turn, people purchasing artworks. Social media didn't really exist in those days at the beginning when I first started, but I had a lot of media attention, a lot of PR. I had a team of interns who worked with me, and everyone was as passionate as I was, and we're all doing the very best we could to support the artist in the best way possible. And so that was really the starting point. And I was representing, I had a stable of about 20 artists who I was really passionate about. They didn't have to be established. I was very interested in supporting emerging artists who needed to have the support from someone like myself to get them out there. In fact, probably all of them were. And I would quite proudly say to you to this day, now they're all exhibiting.
So there were obviously solo shows, and there was the restaurant downstairs, the gallery upstairs. Was that a sort of representation where you had an exclusive agreement, or was it more informal on a consignment basis?
We had a contract. I like everything to be very transparent. I understand the gallery world very well. I was a member of the Gallery Association in Australia. You had to become a member, you had to be vetted, and we would talk about best ethical way to represent an artist. It was incredibly important to me. So everything was laid out in a contract. Everything I could possibly think of was in that contract. So it was very transparent. We'd never have a problem with anything. If the work didn't sell, what happened to the work? If the work does sell, what happens? Who does what? Who does this? It's very, very extensive and exhaustive list.
I think this is very interesting. Contracts and just transparency in general is important, but can be such a taboo subject in the artist gallery relationship. And as you said, it allows you to put, everything quite clearly. This is what happens if you put the work on consignment with me. If you leave it at the gallery, it doesn't sell within this or this amount of time, I'm sending it back to you. Who pays for that? On a practical sort of basis, are there anything that you would advise artists to think about when they're thinking about gallery representation, or anything that you might think that would actually be nice to have in writing, even if it's just in an email, by the way, just have it in writing so everybody knows?
So as I said, I've always had contracts. I have contracts for the residency, running the residency. We have up to 50, 60 people per annum who come. It has to be transparent. We have exhibitions here at the end of the residency, and work gets left behind. And then what happens if the work doesn't sell? So these are very important questions, whether you're in a gallery or whether you're here at the residency. They're important questions to ask. I think the most important thing is, if you have the question in your mind, whatever it might be or how silly you might think it might sound, to always ask it and not to be shy to ask a question that you feel slightly inhibited by, or inhibited by the people that you're talking to. I think everything needs to be very clearly communicated. I believe that the gallerist has that responsibility. And if you feel that the gallerist is evasive in any way, that would be, a bit of question mark for me. And I don't know if I would agree to go with that gallery because they're not answering my questions directly. It's incredibly important to establish that right at the very beginning, to be as transparent. So any niggling little question, what happens to my artwork? Or if you have interest, how do you establish that interest further? Who are your collectors? Where do they come from? Are they international? I think we should give ourselves the permission to ask those questions. I do think that the gallerist doesn't always like it because they want to take control of all the situations. But what it does is it teaches the gallerists to be more communicative about those things that are important to the artist, and to work better to establish a relationship with the artist. The relationship is everything. And I've had artists who've come to me over the years who've talked about other galleries and how they performed. And I was very uncomfortable about some of it because it's not my way. So I just think always ask as many questions as you wish to ask.
As you say, it's all about the communication and the relationship. Most of the time, the interest of the gallerist and the interest of the artist are fundamentally the same thing, which is to find a collector and a home for this artwork that you both love, so it can be cherished and have a life that way. But there's also the artistic interests of the artist, of wanting exhibitions, perhaps wanting international exhibitions or international curators, fairs, publications. And it is not just a commercial enterprise, and definitely not a commercial enterprise like any other.
And I think, as a gallerist, you just have to be really honest about your situation. So, for example, going to an art fair costs a huge amount of money. And we did go to art fairs. So I know how expensive, particularly the international art fairs, very, very expensive. And you either have to have private funding, or you have to have public funding, or you have to have funding from somewhere. So you can't just whip up, £20,000 to take you to Singapore or to Kiev or to wherever. It's incredibly difficult. So I think the artist has to also be respectful of the gallerist. There are some galleries out there who have the money, who can do it, and they just do it, and it's sort of easy for them. Because I found that there were three different, thinking back to my time when I was in Sydney, you had the galleries that existed as foundations who were extremely wealthy in their own right, Or you have the galleries who lived within their accommodation. So they might have bought a beautiful property and the gallery is downstairs and they live upstairs. That's another way to have a gallery. So you don't have the overheads. That reduces your overheads. So you're competing with all these other galleries or institutions, and you try to do your best, but you just have to be honest. I think the most important thing is establishing a very good relationship. So they become friends, you care for them deeply. And I think if you can prove that within that relationship, then they know that you're going to do your very best for them. And you might not be able to take them to the art fair that year, but you'll consider them for the next year. It's not very easy, but I think the most important thing is establishing a very good relationship.
Thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch the full 1-hour interview and get top tips from an expert, then click the link below and join the Art Ladder mentoring program now. By joining the Art Ladder, you will get access to our full library of webinars with curators, collectors, critics, gallerists, and more. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this, and check out the description below for more free resources for artists.